Alright everyone, welcome to a brand new video. Today we're going to be going over my personal favourite Resident Evil games in the series. From the thumbnail, that's not a shock, so it's not a spoiler to which ones are my favourite. They're in no particular order, it's just these three are my personal favourites. We're going to be going over the story, we're going to go over gameplay. Of course, spoilers for Village will be included, so if you haven't played that yet, be sure to not watch that part. You can either skip ahead, because we're doing Village first, or go play the game and come back, because I highly recommend playing that game without knowing anything about it first, because it just makes it so much better. I can't believe I actually managed to get the game on the release without getting it spoiled, because people had it like a week early, which is just ridiculous. But we'll start with Village, so this is your spoiler warning, so if you haven't played it, move away. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and just jump straight into it, shall we? Okay, so Resident Evil Village. Let me start by saying this game is incredible. It is way better than I expected it to be. I expected it, honestly, when it got first shown. Was I excited? Absolutely. I lost my shit when this game got announced. But I expected it to be a very, very similar game to 4. Almost too similar. And for the most part, the gameplay wise, it is. But it's just different enough to not feel like just a straight up 4, not a remake, but like a 4 clone. It has its own uniqueness, and it differs from 4 a lot, which is very, very nice. If you don't know, the story takes place a few years after the events of 7. Ethan and Mia have a daughter called Rose, and after Chris found them, he has got them a house somewhere in Europe, and has military trained Ethan to protect his family. And everything's fine until Chris barges in and kills Mia in front of Ethan, which isn't great, and takes Rose from him as well, leaving Ethan unconscious and putting him in the back of a truck. When he comes around, the truck's been turned over, Rose is gone, and all of the soldiers that came with Chris are dead. Ethan follows some footprints into the woods and ends up at the village, which is where the events of the game take place. You're always in the village or around the outskirts of the village, so this is where you are throughout the entire game. You then meet Miranda later in the game, who is the one who took Rose, and what she's basically trying to do is bring back her dead daughter. Her daughter died many years ago in, I believe, one of the Spanish flus. I think the law says. The law says that she died into that quite early on as a baby. And Rose isn't exactly a normal child, which we'll get into in a minute, because that's more of like an end of the game kind of reveal. But she's not exactly a normal kid, and Miranda believes that she can use Rose like a vessel to bring back her daughter, who's called Evie, or Ava, that's the one, who, surprise surprise, Evelyn is based off of, which again we'll get to in a moment. But it's all linked. You would think that 7 is just 8 is just a continuation of Ethan, but it's all linked. So let's jump into the main story points right now, shall we? Just to get out of the way. Spoilers, by the way, 100%. This next part is spoilers, 100%. Okay, so important things to take away from the end of the game is Mia, who died, wasn't Mia. It was Miranda. Miranda had infiltrated Ethan's house, took the real Mia, and took her place. You find out later on in the game that Miranda can transform into anything she wants to. So she, throughout the game, she is Mia at the beginning. She is the witch, like the hag woman you meet randomly. That's her too. And I believe she's someone else at some point in the game. I'm not 100% sure. But you find out that at the end of the game, nearly. And when you find that out, she kills Ethan. She rips out Ethan's heart, and he dies temporarily. And then the big secret is exposed, like the big one, the big reveal, which is that Ethan died at the beginning of 7. When he initially went to find Mia, and Jack found him and did the whole welcome to the family punch to the face and stomp on him, that killed him. He killed him then. And they brought Ethan back with the mold. Now, if you are familiar with 7, you'll know that the mold affects people in different ways. It depends if their body can handle it. With the Bakers, they have Jack has regeneration, dramatic regeneration. As you can tell, the one fight where you literally rip him in half with a chainsaw and he comes back as a big monster. Marguerite, something with the bugs, I'm not specific as to what that is. And then Zoe she's infected but she doesn't want it. I don't think she has any powers that you actually see. And then Lucas, you find out Lucas the whole time is actually cured, he's just insane. And he's just bonkers. But that's explored in the DLC for 7, that's a whole different thing. But yeah, Ethan's dead. Ethan is infected with the mold, and it kind of explains as to why he gets injured so much, but then just carries on. Like in a bit in Village, Lady Dimitrescu cuts his hand off completely, and he just manages to put it back on normally, like it's nothing with the old juice, the powerful juice. Yeah, Ethan is just mold. Like his body is mold, and he's been a mold monster for a long time. Which is why he's been able to survive as much as he has, but with his heart taken out, the mold can't really regenerate his heart. Like, it can't just keep him alive, it can only repair damages. So without his heart, he is going to die eventually. And when you finally get the final confrontation with Miranda to save Rose, he beats her, she's dead, and he's also dying. So he gives Rose to Chris, who gets them out of there. He then takes the detonator, which Chris has planted on the Mega Marcy, which is now kind of connected with Miranda, to blow up the entire village. And Ethan takes the detonator, Chris takes Rose, and Ethan sacrifices himself, destroying the whole village, and presumably dying. Presumably. Because wait, it's not over yet. So you then skip forward a while into the credits of the game, and after the credits roll, there is a post-credit scene with Rose fully grown up. She's in Ethan's coat, which he gives to Chris, and I believe she's wearing his ring as well. She goes to his grave, just says, I'm doing fine, and classes and stuff like that, generic stuff. And as she's saying that, like a black SUV turns up, like a special agent dude, and she says, jury calls, so it seems she's not exactly living a normal life. And she's probably under the watch of Chris and his team. The man who arrives in the car then insults her, I believe. He calls her Evelyn, and she does not like that. So clearly she knows that Evelyn is, a big reason why her dad is dead. So she kind of gets mad about it, threatens the guy, saying that she has powers even Chris doesn't know that she has, and they get back in the car all miserable. And as the car drives away, the shot lingers for a while, probably on purpose, but the car drives into the distance and someone's walking down the road towards it, and then the car comes to a stop at the person, and then the game fades to black. But I'm not going to go into that now. I have a whole other video kind of theorising what the endings might be. There's loads of theories going on with the ending of the game, especially that part, but that is a whole different thing. That's the key gist of the game. Obviously, the trailers make you assume that Chris is a bad guy who's killed Mia, and now that Ethan's going to get his daughter back and probably try and kill Chris, but it turns out that's not the case. And Chris actually saves his daughter, and Ethan does sacrifice himself to get them out of there. So the old switcheroo happens multiple times in that game. But that's the story for the most part. So now we'll go on to the gameplay side, and well, the gameplay is so good. Okay, moving on to gameplay. Keep in mind, this game, I did say at the beginning, this game takes a lot of inspiration from 4, Resident Evil 4. There is a lot of similarities between 4 and Village that are there enough to clearly see that they're similar, but not enough to make them feel identical. Obviously the story is different, so things play out different. Leon is in the village looking for the president's daughter, and they're affected with Las Plagas, which is like a bug inside them that controls them, and they're still people. They're just a bit out of sorts, we'll say. But the similarities in story are not the same. At a gameplay perspective, you have the attachment case, which is where you can manage and move around your inventory. Your inventory consists of weapons, ammo, healing, and some consumable items that are like in Village it's grenades and stuff like that, and I believe it's grenades and stuff in 4 as well. The key items are in a different section of your menus, and so are the treasures, so they don't take up space in your inventory, which I think is good. I don't mind lugging these things around. Obviously in 7, you pick up a key item and it's in your inventory, and you know, it takes up space. But in 4 and 7, that isn't the case. Key items go to a separate area, which is good. I do like that because it's less annoying, but at the same time, I don't know if I prefer it when the key items did take up space, because then you have to really kind of think, do I need this now? Can I put it away? But the thing is, obviously with 4 and 8, there's no item box, so you can't exactly just pick up something and then go, I'll put it there for later, because you can't. Once you've picked it up, unless you sell it, which you probably wouldn't want to sell a key item, would you? So it makes sense because of the systems of the game, and that point of view. Gameplay wise, 8 is a lot more action packed than 7. It's not horrifically action packed. There is like a whole hour point where it's all spooks, and anyone who plays the game knows exactly which bit I'm talking about. That shit is creepy as fuck. But it's not all action. The last like quarter of the game probably is, because you take control of Chris, and as you expect, Chris is there in a task force, and the village is going crazy at that point. So, you know, it makes sense to be action packed there. But for the most part, it's quite a steady pace throughout the bulk of the game. You know, Castle Dimitrescu, Swamp area, Benevito, her house. They're all very different paces, which is nice. And then obviously you have the factory and Chris part, which is all the action part. So it levels out quite nicely. I do like that. But now we're going to go on to a bit more of the gameplay and the combat, and just kind of go into that a bit more slightly in depth. Okay, so combat in this game is brilliant. The difficulties, this is an interesting one for me personally. This is what I thought. Casual is ridiculously easy. You will not die unless you're an idiot. It's impossible to die. Casual is an interesting one, mainly because of the fact that you take so little damage and you already get so many bullets anyway that it's kind of pointless playing like casual, unless you're trying to do like a speed run, or you know, if you're not too confident in the fact that you're going to try and get the melee weapons only achievement, you can just go on casual and it's nice and easy. The game does essentially new game plus you if you use a completed save, so any upgrades to weapons, any inventory items you have on you at the end of the game you'll keep, which is really nice. With the Duke's cooking recipes as well, they carry over from New Game Plus, so you can have maximum health and maximum speed for sprint almost all the time. So casual was an interesting one. Standard, again, still quite easy, in my opinion. They're very generous with the bullets in standard. You always have ammo for your pistol, which is good. If you do want to play, obviously, if you want to play it casually, I would still recommend playing standard because it's not too difficult. But if you want to play it, like personally for me, like I would say, hardcore is a good place to start if you're already familiar with the games, because I feel like hardcore is kind of like standard difficulty from 7. If that makes sense, like they're kind of the same. Village of Shadows I am yet to do. I'm still just finishing up a couple things. I'm running through a couple of times, getting collectibles and stuff like that, so I'm not entirely round to Village of Shadows yet. I do want to make a whole video on that, which is I'm much looking forward to doing. It's going to be a big one, so it's going to take some time, but I will run it through Village of Shadows, and then I want to do some other runs, some special runs on that game. So I'm looking forward to Village of Shadows. I've heard it's quite difficult, which is good. So we'll see what happens. I'm very excited. But yeah, the gunplay is amazing. The enemy types are awesome. Like I love fighting the Lycans, the armored Lycans, the soldats at the end. I like it all. Like I think the enemy type, the enemies are good. The boss fights are amazing. Dimitrescu might be my favourite boss, just on terms of a visual standpoint. But overall, if you like 4, you'll like Village. Even if the story is not your taste, the gameplay is so similar, but also kind of different enough to be its own thing that you'll love it if you love 4. And you know, if you still want to play it and you are invested in the story of 7, then why not give it a go? Obviously I've just spoiled everything, but I'm just saying, if you didn't mind the spoilers, then if you haven't played it yet, I would recommend it. So that is my kind of coverage of Resident Evil Village. Obviously don't want to go into too much detail because this isn't a review, it's just my opinions. So now I'll move on to Resident Evil 7. Okay, so moving on, we have Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. This game, God, this game. This was probably, until Village came out, my favourite game in the series by far. And it still stands up to be one of my favourite games of all time. There's things I like about this game more than I like about Village that still probably makes it one of my favourite games ever made. This game is gritty, it's dark, it's spooky, the story is amazing. It took the franchise to a whole different perspective. You know, changing the first person was probably the best move they ever made, in my opinion. Like, especially after what happened with 6. They needed to change it up in some way, and making it first person and with full VR support was such a good step in the right direction. Like, the VR alone, that shit's creepy. Like, I don't own a VR personally, but I've seen people play in VR, and that shit's terrifying. It makes the game that was already kind of scary for like the first hour or two even more scary. Like, this game spooks people. I've played a lot of these types of games, so it doesn't personally affect me as much as it might affect most people, because I'm kind of used to video game jump scares for the most part. But that doesn't take away the fact that it is a scary game, and some people would find it spooky. Like, for instance, for me personally, little secret, I'm scared of two things in life that scare me the most. One is the ocean. I can't stand the ocean. I hate the ocean. Going back to Village, the whole part before the Moreau boss fight, where you like run over the planks in the water while you jump scare, that made me anxious. Like, I couldn't handle it, but I did it though. And then little girl ghosts. And could you believe that the main enemy in Resident Evil 7 is a little girl? That shit creeps me out. It doesn't scare me, it just really unnerves me. I hate it, but that didn't stop me from thinking this game was one of the best things I've ever played in my life. Like, it's so good. Now, obviously, with this game, it's been out a long time, so I'm not going to try and like refrain from talking about the story. So I'm not going to there is a spoiler warning, I'll say it now, because I will talk about the end. But most people will probably play this by now who enjoy the series, so we're going to jump straight into the story, and then the gameplay, what I like about it, the similarities between this and 1, and just how much of a good idea this was for the series. So without further ado, let's get started. If you do happen to be enjoying the video so far, why not subscribe? I try and post Resident Evil content and other horror content most days, every day if not every other day. So if that's what you're into, then please do subscribe. And let's jump into why Resident Evil 7 is just so goddamn great. Okay, so let's start with the main goal for the gameplay elements of 7 that Capcom had laid out. They wanted the game to return to how it was originally, and the whole survival horror aspects being front and center. After the mixed reviews on Resident Evil 6 and 5. Some people did like 6, I personally did enjoy the game, but in terms of Resident Evil, it wasn't really a Resident Evil game. It was a balls to the wall action game. It was fun to play, but it wasn't really, didn't have the same feel. 5 kinda kept it. 5 wasn't as intense on the action, at least on the first half of the game. The second half of the game takes a whole different spin. If you play 5, you'll know what I mean by like the ending of the game and how it ends. It's quite extreme. But 7 went back to how things were originally, and not only that, but it changed to a first-person view, which is a first for the mainline series. Obviously, there's a couple side games that I think are in like a fixed camera. Not fixed camera, sorry, like a on-rails game, where you're like it's like an FPS shooter, where it's on fixed rails, but they don't really count. But this went back to survival horror and first person, and it was a big breath of fresh air, and it really helped Capcom really just reignite the Resident Evil fire that they had, because a lot of people were saying that, you know, 5 and 6 were a turning point where the game just kind of went downhill, and I do see that. I still like those games, but I do see the difference between them being an issue. But this just came out of nowhere and just shocked everybody, I guess. Let's start on the gameplay itself. So you're in the first-person perspective, and that's good because most of the map is set inside the house, which is eerily similar to the mansion in the original game. It's all tight corners, it's dark, there's no one around, it's clearly lived in, like there's stuff everywhere, and you don't know what's going to be coming around any corner really, because in the first person view you've got just your eyes, basically, that's it. So if something's around the corner, you aren't going to see it until you turn the corner, which is why it works so well, and why it is so similar to the original games, because Resident Evil 1 and 2 and 3 originally were fixed camera. And again, you couldn't really see around the corner until you've turned the corner. But making this in first person and doing the same effect, where you don't know what's coming, is even more intense because you're gonna see it immediately. Like, with a fixed camera angle, okay, you can kind of like go around the corner and you'll see something at the end, but it would just be like on the side of the screen. But in this, you have to be looking at it. Like, you are looking at what's coming, and that's it. Which works amazingly well with the environment. Like, the house is just amazing, and then you move to the greenhouse and the old house, which is where Marguerite wanders around with the bugs, which is just the creepiest thing. I honestly couldn't tell what was worse, having Jack chase you around from the first hour of the game, or Marguerite walking around the house. I do think Jack had a bit of a comedic value to him. Like, there's a few moments in the game where he is quite funny, especially early on. But I think Marguerite's probably more creepy because she's screaming for you, and it's a bit more like on edge because she's just laughing and screaming, and it's good. But obviously, first person shooter. Again, this went back to how it originally was. There's not a huge arsenal of weapons in this game. They did go back to having a bit more weapons in the village, but not too many. I don't think there's too many weapons in village. Well, I've used all of them, and I only really used like 2 or 3 all the time. I didn't really use them all. But there is quite a few weapons in that game, but in this, I believe it's just the pistol, the shotgun, the grenade launcher, the magnum, and the burner. And I think that's it. Obviously, you get the bonus weapons like the buzzsaw and stuff like that. But in terms of the main game, you've got like 4 weapons you really use, which again was how the originals were, because I'm pretty sure in Resident Evil 1 you had the pistol, the shotgun, the magnum, the grenade launcher, and then obviously the rocket launcher for the final shot on the final boss, which isn't the case in this game. It's completely different. You do kind of get a weapon that finishes it, but it's a completely different thing. Obviously I'm not going to say what, in case people haven't happened to play this game yet, but I'd imagine you would have. So yeah, the first person perspective and the return to survival horror was just a huge deal when this came out, and they got praised so much. And I mentioned it earlier, but the game also has a full VR support on PlayStation, which I don't own a VR personally, as I mentioned, but I've seen videos of the game in VR, and it's just so much more intense. And I don't know what to tell you. Like, they really knocked it out of the park with this game. Like, it's not terribly scary. I mean, Resident Evil games never really are scary, as in jumpy. But the atmosphere in them is usually quite like creepy, I guess. There's not many jump scares in these games. I think there's a few in this that got me first time around, but they were literally out of nowhere ones where it wasn't like predicted. It was probably just like turning around, there was a mold in my face and I jumped, but the scripted ones didn't really get me. But you can still get surprised by random encounters in the game, I guess. Same with Village, really. Like, there was one specifically in Village. This was my 3rd playthrough. I went through a house to fully search that you go through early on, but I must have missed the first time through. And this pig just happened to be in there, and it squeals as immediately as you open the door. I'm like, shit myself. Like, but the scripted jump scares aren't really that bad. There is a whole scene in Village where it's just straight up creepy, and I know everyone's talking about it now, but away from Village now. Back to 7. We've already spoken about Village too much. But back to 7 is probably one of, if not the strongest horror game of all time. Like, it's the atmosphere, the characters. The characters are amazing, especially the whole family. There was whole different versions of the family that were going to be out before the game launched. There's a bunch of concept art you can find if you have the deluxe edition of Village, but you can go through that in your own time. But I think the characters are all very, very, very different and very well done. Obviously Jack, Marguerite, Lucas, Zoe, and Evelyn, I guess you could say she's part of the family. They're all really, really good characters, really good, and each of their areas represent them in such a good way. Like, obviously Jack has the main house because he's the dad, he's like the man of the house, right? Marguerite, in the greenhouse, there's a lot of backstory in the game that says she loved to like be in there all the time. All the bugs that came with her like mutation really fit that. Lucas is the interesting one in this game. It's hinted at that he's not infected throughout the entire game. I think it's true. But obviously in the Not Hero DLC, you do fight him at the end as a mutated monster, which is awesome. I haven't played it in a while, so I might have to go through that again, because it was quite good. And his whole area was kind of heavily, I think, inspired by like the Saw movies and stuff, because it was all traps and games, and like it just played really well. And then Evelyn's part is obviously where you play Mia and you're on the boat, and it's all like you find out how Mia and Evelyn ended up at the Baker house, and that whole part. People do kind of not enjoy playing that part of the game. It's good for like a story point, but I always get lost when I'm doing it too. I always get lost. I don't hate it. I get lost. Out of like the few runs I did for the speedrun achievements and stuff, that bit tripped me up every time. Like the ones end up going back and forth. But it's an important part of the game. And then obviously at the end of the game, Chris turns up, and that was questions upon questions on top of questions when he turned up, because obviously he turned up in an umbrella helicopter, and everyone was like, well, wait a minute, Chris is working with Umbrella now. But obviously Village does kind of go more into that. Not terribly, like not an awful lot, but you kind of get a rough idea of what Chris's deal is. And the story of 7 is just, I really like it. But story and gameplay is awesome. Now we're going to really focus on the similarities between the first and this one. So straight away, obviously, like I mentioned before, a big similarity between this and the original is the limited weapons and limited ammo. If you play through 7 on a standard difficulty, you will kind of, especially if it's your first time through, you will kind of struggle with the ammo. At least that's all I remember. Some bosses took me a couple of times because I had to backtrack and find ammo to try and beat them. Now, especially Marguerite, like she was the hardest one, I think, my first time through. Which is, just crazy thinking about it now. But standard in this game is really good. It's a really good way to start. Again, casual in this game is a bit too easy. Again, same with Village, like they're both really, really easy, but I guess that's just for people who want to play through and enjoy the story, which is totally fine. The original obviously had an easy difficulty, a normal difficulty, and a hard difficulty as well. And if you play the hardest difficulty on this game, which is Madhouse, it remixes all the items in the game, so the item spawns are different. It adds limited saves, which is another thing that was in the original games, where you have to find ink ribbons to save at the toll roads. In this game, it's the cassette tapes to save into the cassette players, and they are quite limited. So you can't just save whenever you want. You have to plan your saves out, because autosave is, I believe autosave is disabled in Madhouse. So you have to save manually. So don't forget, and do it when you feel it's necessary. The item box also is in this game as well. This is obviously a way to store items across the entire map. Obviously, item boxes are magic boxes that transfer all the items you found throughout each of them. This is a useful thing, because in this and in the original Resident Evil, the key items you find stay in your inventory. Obviously, Village doesn't do that. It has more of a full way of doing it, where the key items are in a separate menu, so they don't take up space. But in this game, they do, and some of them can be quite big. I take up 2 slots, some of them. Or there's times where you need 2 of them, so you have to carry 2 items that are individual, so you need quite a bit of space. The backpack system does get upgrades throughout the game though, so you can upgrade your inventory space if needed, which is really nice. Puzzles are, I think, there's not many puzzle areas in 7 particularly. There is one early on to do with the 3 pieces of the Cerberus thing on the door. There is the Lucas Happy Birthday tape, which is probably one of the better puzzles in the game. It's really, really cool how they do that. How you kind of watch your tape back and play it. I really like that. And then, I guess you could say the boat is a puzzle on its own, because you have to kind of figure out which order you've got to do things in. The whole area is a puzzle, but there's none of the old original like push and puzzles and riddles and stuff like that. There is a few of those in Village. Obviously, Village does take inspiration from a lot, but in 7 the puzzles are quite limited, but they're still enjoyable. You really have to kind of just take that as you will, because the puzzles in this game aren't the hardest thing to figure out. It's more about exploring the map and finding key items rather than doing puzzles. What else can we say about 7? That's kind of similar to the originals. I think that's everything. I think that's basically everything. In terms of similarities between the original games and 7, there's a lot. And I've probably missed a few things, so if anyone does have a few things that I haven't said, obviously let me know. And that's basically me covering 7. Like, 7 is a fantastic game. Story is amazing. It was such a big deal when it came out, because it finally went back to how things were. And if you haven't played 7 already, I would recommend it, especially if you're thinking about getting Village, because there is a recap video at the beginning of the Village that explains what happens in 7, but it's better to play it because it doesn't really explain everything. And it is a direct sequel, so would recommend. 10 out of 10 game. This game is amazing, and I couldn't really not recommend it more. So now we're going to move on to the final one, which is the Resident Evil 2 remake. This has a lot going on in it, and there's a lot to say, so let's do it. Okay, so last and most definitely not least is the Resident Evil 2 remake. This is incredible. A little bit of backstory. I never played the original. I'm still trying to find a way, even now, to try and play it somewhere, but I'm struggling. But this game was the first time I'd ever played Resident Evil 2, and I'd heard like amazing things about it. And it doesn't disappoint. You follow Leon and Claire. It's the first time Leon's in the game, and it's the first time Claire is ever in the game. Leon is a rookie cop, and he's on his first day at RPD, and it doesn't go to plan. I guess you could say it doesn't really pan out how he thought, because Zimbambos appeared. Claire meets him on the way, and she is there looking for Chris, because she is Chris' sister, and the STARS team that Chris is from works inside Raccoon City. Obviously that is Jill, him, Barry, Rebecca, all those characters, and he ain't there, but she's looking for him anyway. And the story takes place, among the very beginning of the outbreak in Raccoon City, and you basically have to try and escape the city with Claire and Leon, and Sherry in tow. Sherry is the daughter of William and Annette Birkin, who are kind of responsible for the outbreak in the city. Annette is there trying to... I think she's trying to save Sherry, but she's not the best mum in the world, and she's also trying to get some research off of William, who is infected, and has turned into a monster who is constantly harassing you throughout the game. If you're playing as Claire, and if you're playing as Leon, you get to experience Mr. X, who is the tyrant in trenchcoat that there's hundreds of memes about, that follows you around the police station, and it inevitably comes to fight you at the end of the game. If you're playing as Leon, and if you play the game as Claire, you fight Birkin at the end, which is awesome. But that's the story, as best I can explain it in a couple of minutes. So let's get into the gameplay and how I personally feel about the game. Okay, so let's start with the gameplay in this game. Resident Evil 2 originally was a face cam wrangle game, much like the original game and the third game. It clearly shows that they want to try and keep that feel in a third person perspective, because the police station is very like tight cornered, it's very dark. Some of the rooms are laid out quite specifically, so you have to kind of like go around them rather than through them. So you can definitely get yourself cornered and pinned quite easily. The atmosphere is very, very good in this game. They've really done a good job about it. You enter the police station, there is nobody there. Half of the wings are just completely ruined. There's bodies, there's zombies outside, you can hear things outside through the windows. And the zombies themselves, they're not terribly tanky, but they take quite a few shots. And this game, unlike 7, the bullets are even more restrictive in this game. Because it is trying to literally be the original, but you know, in the modern day. So they haven't really changed anything much about the game. I don't know if they've cut certain things from this one, like in 3. Someone will have to inform me if that's the case, because I never played the original, so I don't know what's missing or what isn't. But the survival aspect of this game is definitely there, a lot more so than others. Third person perspective, so you know, like 5 and 6 and 4. Obviously not a tanky controls like 4 or 5, it's more like a free third person like 6. This does run on the RE engine, which is what 7 runs on, so the UI and some of the interact icons and even how the guns feel and how you shoot is a lot like 7, even if it isn't third person. Graphically it's incredible. I always thought that this game was insane for PS4 graphics, like it looks so good. The pacing in the game is very, very, very good and feels very much like the original Resident Evil. Like, obviously you start and you have these 3 like big coin things to find that unlock the underground to the police station, and you have to basically explore the police station, do a couple puzzles to find them all. The puzzles in this game are very, very good. Some of them aren't really puzzles, but again, it's more like go find these things that are hidden, and then come back to this place, and then boom, solution. But nevertheless, there are some puzzles later on that even I was like scratching my head over, because I was like, what the fuck? How do I figure this out? But the pacing is amazing. Even the end game part where it usually ramps up a bit is still quite intense. No thanks to the enemies they introduced later on called the IVs. IVs are essentially imagine a zombie, but you have to shoot it in a specific spot to knock it down, and if it grabs you, you're dead. Like, that's it. Like, if you get grabbed by it, if you don't have like a flashbang, I think you just die. I don't know if that's the case. I think you can survive them if you get grappled and you have a defensive item, but I'm not entirely sure. Like, it's been a while since I played this game all the way through. I do plan to very, very soon on the stream, so keep an eye out for that. But yeah, the gameplay feels very nice. The pacing is amazing. The campaign's differ quite a bit. Obviously you play as Leon and Claire. You can pick you want your players when you first start, and they do change about halfway through the game. Halfway through Leon's, you meet Ada, and you take control of her for a little bit, and that's a whole different segment that you'll never play if you play as Claire. And then if you play as Claire, you get to control Sherry, and again, you can't do that bit if you're playing Leon's campaign. And then how you get into the labs at the end is quite different, because you're both in there at the same point. They're really good at doing that in this game, where the characters still meet up throughout the game, but they're just doing different things. But last half of the game, they differ quite a bit after the initial like character switch, because obviously the final boss for Claire is Birkin, and the final boss for Leon is the Tyrant. and how they end up doing that is quite different. And then when you finish the game on both characters, you get a second run mode, which is basically you do it again. Things are in slightly different areas, like the item placements have changed and stuff like that. Again, there is an option in the harder difficulties on this game as well, where you get the ink ribbons. It's not on the normal mode, which is weird. I always thought it would be. It makes sense to be, but I'm pretty sure the ink ribbons in this game only appear on hard. Again, could be wrong. Haven't played it in a while, but I'm pretty sure it was a standard. You can't save when you wanted, but hard had the ink ribbons, which is just, I love that. I do love that. It really adds an extra depth to the tension that the game provides. In terms of replayability, this game has loads of replayability. Obviously the second runs, which are relatively different to make it feel different, and if you do both second runs, I think you get an extra little thing at the end. But again, I'm not going to spoil it if no one's played it, because it's all my experience in it for yourself. Also, you get the fourth survivor mode, which is where you play as Hunk, who is a elite member of Umbrella, who has been trying to recover a sample of the virus and it's trying to escape, and it's like an arcade mode where you have to run through basically the entire map to get to an evacuation chopper who can get you out. It's quite difficult, but if you beat that, you get Tofu Survivor, which is essentially the same thing, except you play as a massive chunk of tofu with a hat on that only has knives. So it's a bit harder than the fourth survivor version. And then eventually, I think it was like a few months after release, they released some DLCs called the Ghost Survivors. This basically is a selection of like mini games, I guess, where you meet characters throughout the story and then they disappear and you don't see them again, and this kind of covers what happened to them and what was their fate at the end of the game. They're all really cool. I think there's 3 of them. They're all really, really good. And obviously, you had the original Resident Evil replay values where you get the unlimited ammo weapons and the rocket launcher that you can just carry the entire game. And I believe there's a minigun in this game as well. You can get that unlimited ammo if you beat it on certain requirements, which is just a blast. I do remember doing all of it because I have 100% in this game. Platinumed it with everything in this game, so that's probably why I haven't played it in a while. But I do plan to, just for stream's sake. But yeah, Resident Evil 2 is a brilliant game. It's definitely better than the 3 remake. The 3 remake was kind of, I didn't have a problem with it. Again, I never played the original 3, and I know they cut a lot out of it because everyone was saying, "Oh, this whole bit's gone. Where's it gone?" And I wish I did get to experience that. There is a way for me to play original 3. It's not a way I can record, but I have a way to play it, so I'll definitely be jumping through that at some point, probably soon. But I enjoyed the 3 remake. It was very short, but it was very good. And again, I'll probably play that again on stream. I do want to go through kind of basically all of them on the channel again, because now that I'm kind of committed to survival horror games, I kind of want to just have a blast with them all again. And even some of the spin-off ones I have planned, so who knows. But I'm gonna cover Resident Evil 2. I love this game. I love all the games that I've mentioned today. They're all brilliant. I can't recommend them more. And your opinions on what you feel is the best one or best few could change. So if anyone does have any differing opinions to me, do let me know. Obviously there's certain games that people love that I haven't played, but either way, do throw them down below because I'll be interested to see who thinks which ones are better. Like some people I know even like 6 and say it's the best one they've played, but that's just an opinion, and I'm not judging anyone's opinions at all. So don't worry about that.